Dragon Slash! Once again.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Master of None here. The beta has officially begun and we finally get to try out the 3 new elite specializations for End of Dragons. Even though my planned main and EOD is the Revenant, I had to log into the Warrior first. I was super curious how hard Dragon Slash would hit in PvP, so that's what I went to test. And well, it was complete trash. It hit for like 5000, which is less than some regular warrior abilities. That plus the fact that you need to charge for a really long time and you're basically immobile makes it completely useless in PvP. Maybe ArenaNet wants Bladesworn to be a PvE only spec, or only have some support builds. I think one-shot mechanics are generally bad for the game, so I can see why they are scared to buff it. As it stands now, however, it's way undertuned. After about 2 games, I was done with it and decided that I'll give Bladesworn a try in PvE at a later date instead. I think the only decent build might be a Shout support warrior, since it has a lot of synergies with ammo. If you take the trait Lush Forest, you start getting a ton of cooldown reduction through your shouts, most of your gun saber skills, your warhorn, and even throw axe if you would take that. This could potentially be really strong, but I couldn't really test it since you can only play unranked this beta and everyone, including me, was just running around like headless chickens, trying to kill each other. So it didn't really feel like a real PvP game. Also, playing a pure support build was just not something I wanted to do in a beta, since it's obviously way less exciting. Since I was so underwhelmed by the Dragon Slash, I did not spend enough time to actually comment on the gun saber skills itself. Maybe if you're a warrior player, let us know in the comments. One thing I want to mention though, back when ArenaNet did the livestream, I was under the impression that the Bladesworn could always choose which weapon he wanted to use for a fight before getting in combat. This is not how it worked in PvP. As soon as the match started, you were locked into the weapon set you were currently wielding. I guess this is also how it works on Elementalist and Engineer, but I'm a bit sad that that's the case for Bladesworn as well. It sounded like a really cool mechanic and could lead to some interesting decision making. Like, were you heading into a 1v1, so maybe you would prefer your greatsword, or you were going to a team fight, so you would use your sword and axe skill. At this point I want to give a little disclaimer that my PvP skills are rather rusty, so if you're looking for how strong the specs actually are in terms of it fitting into the meta, this might not be the best place to look. This video is very much of a first impression and me talking about the general feel of the spec. I also won't go over the details of all the mechanics, since I already did a video on that, which you should see at the top of the screen now. With that out of the way, let's move on to the Vindicator. Now, this was a completely different story. I had a lot of fun playing the Revenant. I tried a couple different builds, but settled for this one. It's almost identical to the Renegade build that is reasonably popular. Renegade is already quite tanky, but Vindicator is on another level. The biggest hurdle for me was having only one dodge, so I tried to take that weakness and turn it into one of my strengths. The crazy damage dodge that we saw on stream is just like Dragon Slash for Bladesworn, completely useless in PvP. Don't get me wrong, it looks freaking badass, but having only one dodge that costs 150 endurance, which is 3 times as much as a regular dodge, makes you way too vulnerable. On top of that, it's super easy to avoid, and if you do hit someone, the payoff just isn't there. It does way less damage than you'd expect. The second Grandmaster trait makes your dodge cost 100 endurance, and was actually not bad to play with. However, for me, the last Grandmaster trait was where it's at. Now your dodge costs as much as a regular one, gives you 1400 barrier and the same amount in healing. On top of that, you also gain vigor, thanks to the traits. The Retribution trait line also makes you recover endurance 25% faster. I can't stress enough how tanky and synergistic this build felt. For legends, I went with Jalis and Shiro. Jalis for a very versatile legend and even more tankiness, an amazing heal, CC and stability. Shiro mainly for an additional dodge, which also gives you endurance back, plus traversal for mobility and quickness. With this combo I could just dodge constantly in Shiro and be very tanky in Jalis. I tried the Legendary Alliance stance for a bit, but I felt constantly energy starved. I was really excited about the Elite where you summon a huge spear, but it didn't do as much damage as I expected, so I switched off of it since the other legends had just so much synergy with the build that I was going for. I also ran an energy sigil on Greatsword for even more endurance recovery. Perfect segue to the Greatsword. It's a really slow weapon, but I guess that was to be expected. It did make hitting enemies with it quite hard though, so Shiro for quickness or Jalis for the taunt really felt necessary. The Greatsword 5 skill feels super satisfying to use. The block on skill 4 is quite nice to have as well, and skill 2 does good damage. I did not like the leap since it felt too short range to be useful. I'm also missing some kind of setup skill to land all these heavy and incredibly slow attacks. Maybe if the leap would immobilize people, it will feel a bit better. I definitely miss impossible odds giving on-demand quickness in these situations. All in all though, a really cool weapon. The cooldowns are quite long, so instead of playing with staff as the second weapon set, I went for sword. I was already way too tanky, so the extra mobility and damage from sword was quite nice. From time to time, my dodge bugged out and my character was invisible after landing again. I'm not sure if this was only the case for myself, or if the enemies saw the same thing. The last point I wanted to touch on is about how ArenaNet is approaching all the End of Dragons Elite specs. It seems that a lot of them come into beta undertuned, or at least not completely overpowered like in the previous expansions. This is probably a good thing for the game and it makes it easier to dial everything in correctly. However, I can't help but feel a bit underwhelmed. The general reactions on Reddit have also been rather negative, and I'm worried that people won't be able to distinguish between if something is actually badly designed or if it is just undertuned. So I wonder, how do you feel about this approach? It's for sure less exciting, but we shouldn't forget that numbers can always be tweaked. I've not had any chance to try the Catalyst yet, but from what I saw it was quite bad in PvP as well. Numbers aside, Hammer just didn't seem to have the necessary tools to be a good weapon. Anyway, that is all for today, and as always, I hope to see you in the next one.